Today I got the urge to start a new project. It's something I wanted to do for a while. I've written about it, and I even tried building it once before and failed. Why today? I don't know. The idea just came to me, and it felt like this was now the most important thing to do. I just had to respond to this urge. Hi, I'm Rickard, and welcome to my channel. I make programming-related videos where I try to document the projects I'm working on and the stuff I'm thinking about, and trying to do that in an interesting way. In this video, I'm starting a new project, and that's to build my ideal code hosting platform. Here's some background. My biggest project that others are also involved in is Timeline. Timeline is a cross-platform application for displaying and navigating events on a timeline. Back in 2017, I wrote about some things that I want from a code hosting platform for Timeline. One of them is registration-free discussions. In Timeline, we use a mailing list for discussions. The most common usage of the mailing list is that non-registered users send emails about problems they have. These emails provide valuable feedback. We don't want to force users to register to provide this feedback. It should be super simple. This works well today. A problem with mailing lists is that when discussions continue in a thread, everyone has to remember to hit reply all on every email to keep everyone in the loop. This inevitably fails. We end up with discussions where registered users reply to the list only and the original non-registered sender is not notified, or where registered users reply directly to the original sender and no one else is notified. So one part of my ideal code hosting platform is registration-free discussions. So here is a workflow I came up with to implement that story. The user visits the project's homepage and sees a list of projects. The user clicks one of the projects and is taken to another page. On this page, the user sees all the conversations in this project, and the user also sees an email address that can be used to start a new conversation by sending an email. The user sends some feedbacks to this email address. A new conversation is created from this email, and it gets a separate page with a separate ID. This page lists all the entries in this conversation and also an email address that can be used to add a reply to this particular conversation. When this conversation is created, an email update is also sent to all the watchers of this project. One of the watchers replies to the email, and that email is added to the conversation, and all the watchers of this particular conversation are also notified by an email. And here we can notify even the original sender of the conversation, even though that user is not registered to the mailing list, because that user is added as a watcher to this conversation, because the user started the conversation. If I can build this, I think we have the basis for a registration-free discussion system. But it's quite a large story. Can we make it smaller somehow and still capture the essence of what we want to do? All the web parts and the user interface in this example are actually not needed. So the user doesn't need to visit a web page and click a project. We can just give the user the project email address in another way and scratch everything that has to do with the web UI and just create a system working with email. I've prepared a repo where we can start building this, so let's dive in. So this is the start of my new project. I call it projects because it's supposed to host my projects. And in here there are a few files. We have the implementation, we have sort of like a make file, and we have a readme file. So let's have a look at them. So first of all, let's have a look at the ZeroPy file. So this is set up to run tests from the projects file. So we can run it with the build argument, and it will run tests, and otherwise it will print unknown command. So let's try it. So first, let's just run it without commands. Now we'll print unknown command, and we can do something else, and we'll also print unknown command, and we can pass the build argument, and that will actually run the tests. So we'll create a test suite, add the doc test for the projects module, and pass some options to doc test, and make sure the exit code is 1 if this is not if the tests don't pass. So that's the basic setup of this, and projects is just basically an empty Python file with 1 test. So if we change the test here, we'll get a test failure here and an exit code of 1. So this is a brand new project, much not in here, so let's start building. Let's have a look at the README file at what I'm thinking this should be. So yeah, this is an attempt to build my ideal code hosting platform, and I've outlined the initial story here. So what is it, the first thing that this system should do? So first thing is that someone sends an email to this project email address. And this email is processed by our system and a new conversation is created. And everyone that watches the timeline project is sent an email update about that conversation. And that email has a reply to header set to the project plus the conversation ID. So a watcher that receives this update can reply to it, and the reply is processed by the system and is added to the conversation. And again, everyone that watches the conversation is sent an email update about the reply. So the basic structure to make this story happen for this code hosting platform is that there are emails coming into the system. We process those emails, create projects and conversations in some kind of database, and then we send emails out. So this very first story is mostly like some kind of mailing list software functionality. That's the only thing it's going to do. So in this first story there will be no web user interface. So just a new kind of mailing list software. And incoming emails can be added manually. So this part right here, how emails enter the system is done manually. So I plan on like copying pasting emails into the system as a first step. And maybe here projects and watchers can be added manually, so we can populate this database manually with some projects and watchers. So yeah, let's see if we can start building this. So I open up the implementation and let's run tests in a loop as well. There we go, and let's fix this example again. So if we look at the steps on the left here, so this starts with someone sending an email to the project email address. So if we want to test this part right here, and we want to say something like so like give system an email, assert that conversation is created, something like that, and assert that email updates are sent, maybe something like that. So I'm thinking to do this first step here, give system an email, I'm thinking that we will invoke project something like this. So say we have an email on disk somewhere. and then give it to projects, pi, and then the command say process email or something like that. So when projects is run with the process email flag, it will read an email from standard in and process that email and do some stuff. So a certain conversation is created, we need a database for that. So I'll go ahead and create some infrastructure wrappers for this so that we can actually write this test. So now we're passing an email on standard in, and we don't have a wrapper for reading standard in yet. But I imagine if we had, we would do something like down here, we would do something like email.parse self dot something like that, and then we'll get an email, and we can do something like so we have a processor, maybe I don't know, bad word, that we create with some kind of database that we get from here. We'll do something like that, and then we can assert that something happened in the database. Yeah, so I want to work on this parse thing first, that we can parse emails. So let's see what that looks like. So now I want to work on, let's see, what's actually going to happen here. So let's run the tests. So I want to, yeah, let's create email processor. Process email dot parse self dot study in dot read. So I want to do something like that. Let's remove that. Just see what happens. So this fails because email processor doesn't exist. This is a really bad name, but we'll figure out something better later. So process email pass. So for now, let's just print email dot get from, saying like, hey, this was processed. So we should get this right here, yeah, in the main test. So instead of printing the email, we're printing just a from address. So what we have tested here now is that the projects app, it can actually parse email and pass it to the processor and let the processor do the job. So now we can write more specific tests for the email processor, and we can write those like this. So email processor, process email, create test instance, yeah, something. So this will print the from address. Let's just add that as an example here. Right, so let's have a look at what we had in the beginning here. So we can give the system an email now and assert that a conversation is created. So that's the next thing that we want to work on. And that is now going to happen in the email processor. So let's see, we have it here. So the test is going to be something like, I create a conversation when I receive an email to a project email or project address. So that's going to be the test. And for now, let's just return something like, let's just print conversation created. Yeah, and we can print here. And we also have to change the main test up here to say conversation created, because that part is duplicated. Another weekend, and I made some more progress on this project, so I thought I'd show you the current state and give a little demo. So if we have a look here in the project's PY file, so it is currently around 800 lines of code. And it starts here by instantiating the project's app and running it. So let's have a look at the tests for that. So the project app can be tested like this. So we can run this in test mode and giving it passing command line arguments. So in this case, we're testing that this application can process emails. And we're simulating that we're passing an email on standard in here, and we're simulating that the database contains a project called timeline. So when we process an email which is sent to the timeline project, we assert that a new conversation is created in the timeline project. So that's the basic function to the processing email to create a conversation. And we also have commands to create a project and to add a watcher to a project so we can set up a database, and we'll see how that works in a moment. So let's move down to, let's see, I think it's in email processor. Yeah, so the bulk of the stuff happens here. So when we run process email, we instantiate an email processor, pass database and SMTP server, and call process on the raw email. So this test is a bit messy. I should probably clean it up a bit, but it says here that I create a new conversation in a project. So we set up an email processor for test purposes. We get a reference to the database, events of things that happened, and the processor itself. So we start by creating a project called Timeline in the database, and we add 2 watchers to that project. Then we create an email which has the to address of the Timeline project, and we call render here to get like a byte array representing the email. So we have a raw email, and then we pass that to the processor. And we can see here that if we filter the events on email sent, we can see that there are actually 2 emails sent via SMTP server, and it's sent to watcher 1 and watcher 2, and also the reply to is set to Timeline plus the ID of this conversation. We can also filter on the file written event, which is all the file writes to the file system that would happen in this case. So you can see here that it creates a bunch of JSON files, some information about the project, and we store the email, and we store the conversation, and we'll see more how that works in practice later on. And here are some more asserts saying that, yeah, there should be a new conversation in the Timeline project. It should have this ID, and if we load this conversation with that ID, we get all the entries and so on. So asserting that this was actually, a conversation was actually created. Well, yeah, I think that's the basic functionality. Also, I plan to run this on my Linode server in the cloud. So I have a setup script to set up a new Linode for these purposes. So let's take a look at that. So the script is right here. So here's some documentation like how to set up a Linode initially. So when you get an initial Linode set up, you can SSH with the root user and set it up. So this just runs bash and reads the scripts from standard.in and will pass this script right here. So it assumes that it's a Fedora distribution, which is what I use, but maybe the script want to generalize it, use something like Ansible to set up a machine, but this works for now. So this first part here are some settings specific to my machine. So this is where I'm going to host it. This is my public SSH key, so I can SSH into it, and so forth. So it will create a user, set up SSH keys, secure SSH so that we can't log in as root anymore. What else? We create a project folder under /opt. We install some dependencies, and in particular we install Python and postfix. So, or postfix maybe it's called. So email SMTP server and Python and Git. Set the host name, yeah. So set up this machine so that it has all the dependencies to run our projects and also to send emails. So I'll show you what this looks like, and I'll show you one demo. So I've prepared a bit here. So this is the address of my Linode. So let's run this and see what happens. So I should point out that this is now an empty Linode, a clean Linode, so there's nothing on it right now. Now the Linode is set up, and I should be able to SSH to it like this now, using this project's user that I created. Seems to work. And now I can go to this project's folder. So this is the folder set up to host this project, and there is nothing here right now. So let's clone the latest version of projects. There we go. And now when you run projects, it assumes that the database or the file system, the database is stored in the current directory. So let's make a directory for our database. And let's go into that directory. And now let's create a project called projects. So we will invoke the projects PY file with the create project command and the name of the project. So if we look at the files now, it created the index.json, and if we have a look at it, it's just an empty dictionary. So let's also add a watcher to this project, which is my email address. Did that work out? Let's see. So let's do that again. Let's pipe it to JQ so we can get nicer formatting. Yeah, so now we can see that there is one watcher added to this project, which is my email address. Now it's time to process an email. So I have an example email here, I think. So this is an email that I sent to the project email address. And I actually extracted this from my email client. So this is what I meant by copying pasting emails. So if we run this process email, and let's see if we can copy and paste this email from standard in, like that. And the email has now been processed. So let's see what actually happened. So now we have lots of more stuff here. So we have emails folder, conversations folder, and an entries folder. So let's just have a look at some of them. So let's start by having a look at the project JSON again. And now we can see that it also has conversations, and the ID of conversation is here. So if I have a look at conversation and then this ID, there's a JSON file there, we can have a look at that one, and it has the subject of the email here, and it has a bunch of entries. Let's have a look at the entries. Let's have a look at this one. And yeah, it has a reference to the source email. So we save the source email so that we can later extract more information about it. So for example, at the moment the body of the email is not extracted and stored in the database. And eventually when we start building the web archive or the web UI, we want to display this body of the email in the web UI as well. But when we're just working with emails at the moment, we can just send the email as is and worry about the archive functionality later. But we need to have the original email to be able to generate that stuff. And we can also have a look here in the postfix mail log, and we can see here, hopefully, maybe, that it sent an email to my email address, and I should have received it now. So yeah, that's the current state. The only thing missing now from the original story is that the process email should actually process additions to conversation. At the moment it always creates a new conversation, so it can't handle replies. But we have the basic infrastructure in place to run all of this, and we can keep moving incrementally forward.